For thousands of years, the galaxy believed it knew everything, that every species would eventually bow, that every civilization would fade into the dust beneath the boots of the Coran Empire. And then they declared war on Earth. They thought we would beg. They thought we would break. They believed humanity was nothing more than a smudge on their blood-soaked star maps. But what they awakened wasn't just a species. It was a primal instinct forged through millions of years of suffering, resistance, and evolution. When our cities burned, we didn't cry. When our comrades fell, we didn't mourn. We clenched our fists. We stood up, and we said, "You just declared war on the most dangerous species in the universe." This is not a story for the faint of heart. A journey from despair to devastation. From blood, from fire, to legend. Sit tight, put on your headphones, and prepare to dive into the greatest vengeance the galaxy has ever witnessed. Because this is the moment when the prey became the hunter. The skies across the star systems trembled, as if space itself were screaming. A signal was broadcast on every known frequency, piercing through all language barriers. Not a plea, not a negotiation, but a death sentence for an entire species. The Coran Dominion, a galactic empire forged in conquest over millennia, had made its decree. Humanity will be erased. The message came directly from Grand Admiral Rannick himself, his face cold, eyes glowing gold, and voice dripping with arrogant conviction. "You are a disease," he declared, each word slicing through space like a blade. "A mistake in the path of evolution, and like all mistakes, you will be purged." The entire galactic community fell silent, a silence as heavy as frozen space. No one dared speak. They knew Coran wasn't bluffing. They had seen civilizations burn to ash, entire planets reduced to dust, populations either enslaved or erased like they never existed. And now, the next target was humanity. But unlike what was expected, Earth didn't beg. No surrender, no appeal, no desperate plea. Instead, a single video, transmitted straight into the Coran High Command secure network. A human soldier, bloodied, armor scorched, stood among the ruins of New Moscow on the colony world of Grom 4. Behind him, black smoke curled, red fire crackled, and the shattered bones of a world cast into hell smoldered in silence. He didn't tremble. He smiled a cold, terrifying smile. His voice, steady and eerily amused, rang out. "Congratulations, you've just declared war on the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Then the signal cut, and thus the war began. Not a border skirmish, not a proxy fight. A full-scale galactic war between a millennia-old empire and a species no one had ever taken seriously. Coran had never lost. Their fleets moved like floods, like storms devouring civilizations with precision. They accepted no surrender, took no prisoners. They annihilated. And they believed this time would be no different. Earth? To them, humans were noisy primates, constantly at war with each other, technologically inferior, plagued by internal conflict. In Coran eyes, humanity was little more than monkeys with laser sticks, a chaotic planet among millions already subjugated. But they made the gravest mistake any empire can make, underestimating those who refused to kneel. On Earth, billions watched Coran's declaration of extermination. No one cried. No one panicked. They clenched their fists. Their eyes burned. Children born in peace stood as warriors. Elders who had seen the Second World War stared into the skies, remembering history. Because there was one truth Coran would never understand. Humans do not give up. Push them to the edge, and they don't break, they ignite. And it started right there on Grom 4, one of the first colonies to fall to Coran's blitz. And the spark that would ignite the inferno. When the first Coran warships entered orbit, resistance was minimal. New Moscow, largest city on Grom 4, was bombarded mercilessly. Skyscrapers collapsed, planetary defenses were neutralized in hours, and thousands perished in the opening onslaught. Then came the resistance. Not from trained soldiers, not from command centers, but from engineers, farmers, mechanics, nurses, civilians who became warriors. They dug into the earth, forged weapons from scrap, laid traps in every alley. They fought with no rules, no commands. They fought because they had one goal: make the enemy bleed. Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched in stunned silence. They had once bowed before Coran, begged for survival. But this time, something was different. Humanity wasn't retreating. They were becoming feral. Then came the unthinkable message to Coran's high command. A Coran warship has been seized by a human strike team. Silence. Shock. No species had ever done such a thing. No one infiltrated Coran's top-tier warships. No one survived such attempts. But humans didn't just infiltrate. They captured the ship and were preparing to turn it against its makers. To the Coran, this was more than war. This was blasphemy. And yet, it was only the beginning. Grom 4, where nightmares awaken. Grom 4, once hailed as humanity's Little Eden, was now nothing more than a scorched scar across the galaxy. The city of New Moscow, once a beacon of peace among species, had become the birthplace of the fiercest hatred in human history. Now, amid the rubble where a bustling trade center once stood, only screams and explosions remain. The Coran forces, infamously known as an undefeatable military machine, had landed with absolute certainty. They would crush all resistance within a few hours. But hours passed, then days, and New Moscow still hadn't fallen. In a half-collapsed bunker beneath the central square, Major Elias Carter clutched a blood-stained map. His armor was dented, face caked in dust and blood, but his eyes still burned with fire. He was no longer just a commander, he had become the embodiment of resistance. Status? Carter growled into his calm. "We're still holding, sir," Lieutenant Vasquez replied through heavy breaths. "But we're running out of ammo. The Coran just keep pushing. They think we'll break if they keep pressing forward." Carter let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Then, let them think that, and kill them when they're most confident." Elsewhere, Vasquez was rewrapping a wounded fighter's arm. She had been an engineer, not a soldier. But on Grom 4, titles didn't matter. Everyone was a warrior. Everyone had one mission: hold every inch of ground no matter the cost. Human tactics were unlike anything Coran had ever faced. There were no fixed front lines, no standard formations. Every street was a minefield, every basement a death trap. Ambushes came from sewer grates. Plasma bombs were buried beneath rubble. Electric cars were turned into mobile infernos. A Coran commander had once screamed in desperation, "They don't fight like soldiers, they fight like monsters." And he was right. Every inch gained cost them blood. Every alley, every staircase dragged them deeper into hell. Coran drones scoured the skies, scanning for hot zones where life signs flickered. But Carter's team had learned to deceive them. They used corpses as decoys. They staged retreats, luring squads into dead ends, then brought entire buildings crashing down on their heads. At one brutal engagement in the central plaza, 5 resistance fighters held off an entire Coran platoon for over 3 hours with just 2 rifles, a blowtorch, and an unbroken will. Meanwhile, in orbit, Coran reinforcements kept arriving. They believed numbers would eventually overwhelm the resistance. What they didn't anticipate was how high that cost would climb. Across the stars, subjugated species began to take notice. At first, they thought stories of human resistance were a joke. But then images leaked. Rows of dead Coran soldiers lying at the feet of bloodied but still standing humans. For the first time in millennia, Coran had met an enemy that didn't fear death. Near a power station alley, Vasquez had just finished rigging a makeshift mine out of scrap parts. A young fighter asked, "Are we falling back?" She smirked. "No, we're giving them a reason to regret ever stepping foot on this planet." At night, Coran warships bombarded the ruins, tearing apart what remained of civilian districts. Yet every burst of plasma from the sky only sparked new waves of rebellion. They rained fire on humanity, and from the ashes, we rose, screaming. Inside a temporary command post, Carter stared at a flickering tactical Mapefree sector blinking red. Encircled, engaged, cut off, casualties mounting. But he didn't see failure. He saw checkpoints of defiance, each light a torch held by warriors refusing to fall. "Hold the line, no retreat," he barked over comms. "If we're going down, we drag hell down with us." And drag it they did. In less than a week, Coran had lost nearly a quarter of their forces on Grom 4. Their elite units were butchered in collapsed neighborhoods. Supply ships were shot down mid-landing. Grom 4 was no longer an easy target. They now called it the Gates of Hell. Then everything changed when a human team, small, secretive, desperate, achieved the unthinkable. They infiltrated a Coran heavy warship and took control. No one had ever done it. No species had survived boarding a Coran battleshiplet, alone captured one. Coran High Command froze when the news arrived. The Varric flagship-class vessel had been lost, and it was now in human hands. In that moment, Grom 4 was no longer just a battlefield. It became the beginning of their downfall. The Coran weren't fighting the weak anymore. They were up against something unyielding. Grom 4 did not fall. It became a symbol of vengeance, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Seizing the warship, a historic humiliation. No one in the galaxy had ever believed such a thing could happen. No analyst, no military strategist, not even the most delusional dreamers had dared to script something so absurd. A main battleship of the Coran Empire had been stolen. By humans? That warship was the Cadiz Varaka monstrous construct built to obliterate entire planets. Nearly 4 kilometers long, clad in multi-layered plasma armor, and equipped with a weapon system capable of annihilating a continent with just 3 shots. Nicknamed the God of Death in Space, the Varric was a sacred emblem of Coran's invincibility. And now it was under the control of a ragtag group of humans. Inside the command deck, bathed in crimson emergency lights, Captain Daniel Rohr stood frozen before the alien central console. His hands trembled not out of fear, but disbelief. They had done it. They had actually done it. "We're standing on the corpse of a god," whispered an engineer behind him. Eyes wide, hands covered in dried blood, both human and Coran. Rohr didn't blink. His voice was steady. "No," he said. "We're sitting on their throne." Beside him, Lieutenant Harper, the brilliant hacker who had cracked Coran's core systems, worked feverishly on a glowing alien interface. Strange glyphs flickered, twisted, and were quickly decoded, bypassed, overridden until control was theirs. "Thrusters stable, navigation locked, weapon systems are online and responding to input," she reported quickly. Rohr nodded. "And communications?" Harper gave a wicked smile, her eyes gleaming. "Ready to phone home." Instantly, a secure communications channel opened. The signal bounced through hundreds of encrypted Earth satellites, navigating through the static of war until it arrived, blinking on a main screen in humanity's Supreme Command Center. On that screen appeared the cold, sharp face of Admiral Kasari, the Supreme Commander of Earth's defensive forces. "This is Kasari," she said, her voice like a blade. "Confirm source." Rohr stood tall, straightened his scorched armor, and saluted. "Captain Daniel Rohr, reporting live from the Varric." Silence. Kasari froze. The entire command center held its breath. "You're saying the Coran's flagship Varric?" she asked, disbelief bleeding through her normally stone-cold tone. Rohr smirked slightly. "Not Coran's anymore, Admiral, and we didn't just seize it. We're about to use it." For the first time in her legendary career, Kasari smiled. "Good," she said. "Make them remember our name." Back aboard the Varric, Harper initiated a protocol override on the ship's identification system. The ship's IFF, Identify Friend or Foe codes, once sacred to the Coran, were replaced with a new symbol, something not found on any nation's map or fleet registry. A silver skull with burning wings, the mark of vengeance. At that very moment, beyond the orbit of Grom 4, a Coran battle group was approaching, unaware that their own ship, their prized war god, lay ahead, silent and still, like a wolf among sheep. Rohr gave no warning. "Fire!" he ordered. The first plasma cannon burst from the Varric, pierced through the lead Coran destroyer, reducing it to molten shrapnel in seconds. The second hit crippled another ship's engine, sending it spinning helplessly before erupting into a silent inferno. Chaos rippled through the Coran fleet. Communications spiraled into confusion. Why was one of their own ships attacking them? A mutiny? A system glitch? A trick? That moment of hesitation cost them dearly. And against humans, hesitation equals death. While the Coran scrambled for answers, Harper launched a virus into their tactical grid, spoofing signals and jamming recognition software. The result? They couldn't tell friend from foe. Within 5 minutes, 3 Coran warships destroyed. 2 retreated in panic. One ship's controls were hacked, forced to self-destruct by its own security failsafe. From the war-torn surface of Grom 4, Major Carter and his battered resistance fighters looked up at the sky, where fire danced against the dark backdrop of space. At first, they feared a second wave of orbital bombardment. Then came the voice over the comm. "Carter, this is Captain Roar aboard the Varak. Sorry we're late. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine." Carter wiped the blood from his face and chuckled darkly. "Good," he growled. "Time to shoot straight into their sun." Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Humans had captured a Coran dreadnought and were using it to hunt them. This was not just a tactical loss. It was a historic humiliation. No empire known had ever suffered such disgrace. Inside the Coran Grand Council, chaos erupted. Warlords shrieked in fury. Admiral Rannick smashed his obsidian desk, mandibles twitching violently. "They are filth, an abomination. They are animals." Another general, breath ragged, golden eyes wide, whispered what none of them wanted to admit. "No, there's something else. They don't surrender. They don't fear. And they learn fast." For the first time in thousands of years, fear began to spread not among the weak, but among the conquerors. Roar hadn't just captured a ship. He had struck a blow straight into the arrogant heart of the Coran Empire. And while they staggered, humanity rose. Not just resistance, but overthrow. When the first blast from the stolen Varak tore through the void above Grom 4, it didn't just shift the course of a battle, it contorted the entire war. For the first time in thousands of years, the Coran were no longer hunters. They were being hunted. The event unfolded so quickly that Earth didn't even have time to celebrate its first real victory. Admiral Kasari appeared before the unified military coalition. Her face lit up every command screen across colonies, orbiting stations, and capital ships. She didn't give a speech, no hollow heroics. She simply said one thing: this war is no longer about survival. It's about revenge. That sentence became a signal, a spark, a fire. The counteroffensive began with a grand assault of fleets, but with precision strikes in the shadows, the kind of war Coran never expected. Not at their borders, but deep in their gut supply chains, communications networks, logistical arteries, and most insidiously, their confidence. Humanity didn't go for the front lines. They struck the rear. They didn't need to conquer planets, just destroy what Coran relied on to wage war. In the Kelmera star system, a Coran refueling station was plunged into darkness mid-process. Just as 3 warships were taking in fuel, a corrupted signal scrambled their auto-sequencing. They ignited on the pad. The entire station vaporized in a fireball of twisted metal and shattered arrogance. On the slave planet Burvac, a group of human operatives disguised as factory workers planted explosives inside Coran weapon foundries. When they detonated, nearly 18% of Coran's heavy arms production capacity was gone in a single night. At Sivar Prime Relay Station, a human hacker, posing as a low-level technician, uploaded a viral payload into Coran's signal relays corrupting tactical communications across 12 entire star systems. The entire border was left blind and deaf. Humans didn't fight like an empire. They fought like feral wolves, fast, quiet, and terminal. And what terrified the Coran most? Not the bombs, not the weapons, but the will. Coran ruled by fear. But when Grom 4 refused to fall, When the Varak was stolen, and when forward outposts began to go dark, that fear began to turn inward. On the slave worlds, species that had bowed for centuries now began to look up. On planet Galan, a group of Zalan children once shackled and beaten killed their Coran overseer with bare hands, then hung his body from the iron gates of the labor camp. At Outpost Venik, a Coran patrol unit was betrayed by its own mercenaries, who handed them over to human forces in exchange for asylum. Uprisings spread like wildfire. Stations burnt. Outposts vanished. Commanders were found with knives in their throats. Not because of organized armies, but because of a single burning idea: Coran could be defeated. Morale within Coran ranks fell faster than any war planner had predicted. Where once the mere name Earthborn Strike Team would cause planetary withdrawal, now entire Coran squads surrendered without firing a shot. At a crisis session of the Coran Strategic Council, the mighty warlords devolved into shrieking animals. One grizzled commander roared across the chamber. "They don't want land. They don't want resources. They don't negotiate. They've come to tear us apart." A younger general, quieter, but with a voice colder than any plasma cannon, spoke through the silence. "They don't fight like a species. They fight like vengeance made flesh." While Coran leadership drowned in crisis, Ro-R and his elite strike team never stopped moving. The Varak was no longer just a warship. It was a symbol, a dagger driven into the heart of Coran arrogance. And humanity knew that symbol had to be driven deeper. Over the course of a few weeks, Ro-R's team replaced nearly 30% of the Varak systems with Earth-based technologies. American mechanics, Japanese engineers, Nigerian codebreakers, Brazilian shock troopers. They fused Coran might with human madness, creating a beast not even its makers could comprehend. And across its newly repainted hull, in stark letters, a message: no flag, no mercy. Earth's fleet began restructuring not into large fleets, but into rapid strike packs, flexible, decentralized, and unpredictable. They weren't an interplanetary army anymore. They were hunters. And their prey? Every last Coran outpost still breathing. Every time a Coran station broadcast a distress signal, the new protocol from High Command was no longer dispatch reinforcements. It was not again. The galaxy had shifted. The dominators were now the desperate. The ones feared were now fleeing. But Kasari? She accepted no surrender, no peace, no compromise. At a closed meeting between Earth's senior war council, Kasari stood before a map of the galaxy pulsing with red zones. Her gaze was cold steel. Her voice cut like iron. "We don't need to beat Coran on the battlefield. We just need to do one thing: break their belief that they are invincible." Executing an empire. Operation Executioner. There are moments in history that are not written in words, but in blood, fire, and despair. Operation Executioner was never a military campaign. It was a sentence of death for an empire. On the galactic map, the heart of the Coran Empire lay nestled within a star system, wrapped in 4 defensive rings, 6 orbital gun stations, 12 full fleets, and a labyrinth of autonomous satellite drones. For over 3,000 years, no enemy had ever approached without being obliterated, but none of them had been human. At Earth Military Command, Admiral Kasari pointed to a blinking red point on the star chart, Coran Prime, a name once spoken with reverence, now designated for annihilation. "They don't understand," she said quietly. "This isn't war anymore. This is a purge." The plan didn't begin with armies. It began from within with a death squad, warriors who carried a hatred deeper than gravity itself. Captain Ro-R, the one who had stolen the dreadnought Varak, now led the vanguard. The Varak, rebuilt with human feedback systems, reloaded with long-range annihilation-class weaponry, was no longer a battleship. It was a spear aimed straight at the Empire's heart. Masquerading under forged Coran signatures, the Varak pierced the forbidden perimeter. The security satellite scanned its whole no alerts trigger. Harper's falsified IFF tags had bypassed the most secure defense network in the galaxy. Once in position, the first strike began. A seemingly harmless asteroid, actually a disguised kinetic drone, fell through Coran Prime's atmosphere, It did not explode. It signaled. Across the sky, Earth's stealth squadrons dropped cloaks simultaneously. Predators uncloaked mid-hunt. The Coran were caught completely off guard. No orders, no anticipation, just confusion and terror. Human warships didn't advance in formation. They slashed, pierced, and tore through the orbital defenses like wolves descending on a herd. Each strike was surgical, targeting power cores, communication hubs, and weapon control arrays. Below, the ground teams landed in hypersonic drop pod siege, one a meteor carrying death. They slammed into the planet's crust, cracked open, and unleashed warriors wielding the blades of Armageddon. Captain Roar stepped out first. His boots touched down on the sacred soil of the Coran homeworld. Before him stood the Central Coordination Tower, 500 meters tall, overseeing every Coran military operation in the galaxy. He said nothing. He simply raised his hand. From orbit, the Varak fired a single hypervelocity railgun slug. The tower disintegrated in one breathless moment. No more command, no more orders, no more control. Coran Prime had gone tactically blind. Before the dust even settled, Roar's team split in 4 directions each, tasked with erasing a pillar of Coran authority. Harper dove into the quantum command grid. Within 38 seconds, she locked out every internal AI system, reversed control permissions, and triggered failsafes that caused internal servers to self-immolate. Radar stations burst into flames. Combat drones dropped dead. Coran was now deaf. At the Grand Plaza, another team strapped plasma bombs to the monument of the Coran Emperor. When it exploded, the blast collapsed the city's underground transit lines, paralyzing 8 core districts. No one was trying to occupy. Every blow was aimed to sever the Empire's spine. Within 12 minutes, over 40% of Coran Prime's military facilities were gone. More than 60% of their top officers were dead or unaccounted for. Their air defense grid fractured into chaos. And when the planetary emergency beacon pulsed for help, Admiral Kasari gave her final order: send them to hell. From low orbit, the Varak unleashed a superheated plasma strike into the central fuel relay hub. The resulting shockwave melted entire geological sectors. The sky burned blood red. Earth's Leviathan-class destroyers assaulted from reverse orbit, while ground agents deployed gravity disruptors, turning Coran Prime's gravitational field into a storm of collapsing tides. Resistance became impossible. Even balance was denied. Citizens of Coran looked skyward and saw not stars, but a single glowing red eye, the Varak's symbol watching from the void. In a bunker beneath the royal palace, high-ranking Coran generals screamed, argued, and trembled. Some begged for surrender, others demanded evacuation, but they all knew the truth. It was too late, and none of them yet realized that death itself was coming for them. Roar, still alive, still leading, was marching with an assault squad straight toward the last political stronghold of the Coran Empire. There was no longer anywhere to hide. And for the first time in history, humanity had nothing left to negotiate. The death of the Emperor, deep within the heart of the Coran Imperial Palace, carved from ancient stellar core obsidian and inlaid with alloys smelted from the ruins of conquered worlds, the Emperor of the Coran sat curled upon his throne. Outside, his 1,000-year kingdom was burning. Layer upon layer of defense systems, once deemed eternal, now lay in ash. His vast bureaucratic machine had been dismantled. His generals lay dismembered or disintegrated. Galactic data archives erased. Emergency signals unanswered. The networks he once ruled no longer even recognized his voice. The Emperor mumbled incoherently, clawed fingers trembling on the arms of his throne. His eyes, once sharp enough to silence entire species with a glance, were now dull and wild like a beast cornered in its last den. His presence, once called godlike, had diminished to nothing more than a shadow of fear. And then the central gate exploded inward. A plume of black smoke rolled across the gilded chamber like the fury of the cosmos itself. From within the ash stepped Captain Daniel Roar, his armor smeared with blood and fallout dust, his gaze hollow and distant, as if the galaxy behind those eyes had already died. Behind him came the death squad, those who had survived Grom 4, the hijacking of Varak, and the final assault of Executioner. They walked like monuments carved from flame-silent, broken but unyielding. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to end. Roar stopped at the foot of the throne. No one spoke. No one raised a weapon. The Emperor, panting heavily, tried to summon the voice of a sovereign. You are filth, scum of the stars. You were never meant to have a chance. You should never. A chance? Roar interrupted, his voice so low it froze the air. You called the annihilation of planets a civilization? Mass executions your order? Genocide your structure? He stepped forward and drew a plasma-lined sidearm, the same model that had taken down Coran commanders with a single pull. The Emperor recoiled, shrinking into his throne like a reptile blinded by light. We begged, Roar said. We pleaded. We negotiated. We sent peace envoys. And you answered with fire. He looked up now, eyes locked on the being once called divine. Now it's our turn. And there are no words left to speak. No trial. No ritual. No glory. Roar pulled the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder across the chamber. The Emperor of the Coran fell, a gurgle of dark green blood spilling across the throne's foundation. No godhood. No final prophecy. Only the corpse of a tyrant who had engineered a millennium of death. Outside, in the scorched central plaza where the Imperial Monument once stood defiant, every emergency broadcast display across the capital shifted in unison. A single line appeared in blood-red text. The Emperor is dead. That message spread across every star system still tied to Coran control within 17 minutes. Slave colonies ignited into rebellion. Outposts erupted in flame. Coran officers were stabbed in their sleep by their own soldiers. The once muted species rose up, and their battle cry was not for freedom. It was for vengeance. Within 36 hours of the Emperor's death, over 200 Coran planets had fallen out of control. Defense units refused orders, some initiating self-destructs, others fleeing. Officers who once flogged slaves in the square were now hanged with their own chains. At a checkpoint on the Var 7 system, a group of Drenak slaves whose tongues had been cut out at birth broke into the weapons cache. They seized control and executed every Coran soldier in the outpost in under 6 minutes. There was no peace after the death of the Emperor, only the storm. Back in the ruins of the Central Palace, Roar stood before a wall of historical data, once the archive of the Coran Empire. He did not destroy it. Instead, he uploaded a Kodea message. A video. It began with the ruins of New Moscow on Grom 4, then the footage of Carter standing amid the blood and fire, then the Varak's first strike, and finally, the Emperor's death. The video was encrypted and embedded in every remaining Coran Link star system, set to autoplay once per year on this exact day, not as a threat, not as a warning, but as a memory to remind the galaxy, no ruler lasts forever. No empire is immune, and at the site that had once been the command seat of the entire galaxy, Roar turned from the blood-stained throne and walked away. No raised head, no proclamation, just silence, but each footstep echoed through the stars. The new hunters of the galaxy. When the Emperor of the Coran fell, it wasn't just a body that perished, it was the end of an entire era. The throne turned to ash, the empire crumbled into dust. And across the stars, the galaxy stood still, watching as the flag of humanity rose amidst the fire. In the days that followed, there were no more battles, only the hunt. The surviving Coran warships fled into the farthest star systems, hoping to find refuge among the void. But Earth did not pursue them with overwhelming fleets. Instead, it dispatched small, elite kill teams like predators who had tasted blood. They didn't kill quickly. They drew it out. They let the Coran commanders know that no matter where they ran, they would be found. On the desert world of Hethra, a shattered Coran unit tried to re-establish communications. They built a crude relay station, surrounded it with defenses, and clung to the hope that isolation meant safety. 3 weeks later, a single outdated Indigo-class vessel, a human ship long considered obsolete, appeared in orbit. No hail, no distress signal, just silence, drifting like a ghost. They didn't realize it housed a detachment from Phantom Division, humanity's deadliest Black Ops unit, forged in the fires of Grom 4. Within 15 minutes, the entire HFY base was wiped from the surface. No transmissions, no survivors. Only a single phrase carved into the scorched wreckage. "We heard you were hiding." Across the galaxy, fear spread faster than war. Species once enslaved by the Coran began to turn hunter. They needed no orders from Earth, no treaties. Just a single, invisible signal echoing through the dust clouds of space. If humanity could do it, then so can we. On the former slave planet Boltar, the Oven people 3 centuries under Coran chains rose as one. When the last Coran overseer was beaten to death in the square, the people turned north, where the Galactic feed was replaying the broadcast of the Emperor's execution. An ancient Oven elder, whose vocal cords had been removed long ago, picked up a jagged piece of metal, drove it into the Coran crest, and spoke for the first time in decades. "We no longer tremble, because the humans have taught us how to roar." Back on Earth, Admiral Kasari issued no declaration of victory. She didn't need to. She simply stood before the newly updated galactic map. The vast purple expanse that once marked Coran control had now turned to ash and gray. "We are not conquerors," she said to the Council. "We are not here to replace one empire with another." Then she turned, eyes cold as Neptune's frozen rings. "We are a warning." A rapid response force was established, flagless, nameless, free from any national allegiance. Their only symbol, a human footprint on shattered starlight. Their name? The Hunters. They didn't occupy. They didn't claim. Their sole mission was to erase every last remnant of Coran's legacy. Wherever an old Coran outpost remained, wherever a dormant comm relay still blinked in the dark, they shut it down and left only emptiness. But they left more than silence. They left memory. In the Trinac system, a floating Coran fortress was dismantled with such surgical precision that not a single round was wasted. No stray fire, no missed shot. But across the glass observation deck, scorched in by laser, one line remained: "This is what happens when you think we're weak." No government in the galaxy authorized this. No Senate ratified it. This was no longer war between nations. This was the uprising of will, the awakening of a species once dismissed as primitive. A species that could hate, could adapt, and could make its enemies kneel, losing the very weapons that once enslaved them. At Earth's military command, in a quiet observation room, Roar sat alone, watching the orbit of yet another liberated world. A soldier entered and reported that the final Coran systems had gone dark. "We've won," the soldier said. Roar didn't answer immediately. He gazed at the star Mappa, the system still pulsing red. Remnants, survivors, ashes that had not yet cooled. At last he whispered, "We haven't won. We've just become what the galaxy is now afraid of." And for him, that was enough. When humanity became legend, the universe is silent, not because there is peace, but because every being that once called humanity prey is now holding its breath. There are no longer star systems marked with the Coran emblem. No more command centers, no more control stations, no more Imperial launch bays. All of them have turned to ashes in the dark. The only thing that remains is a whisper, echoing through ruins, across abandoned outposts, and within fragmented memory drives. If you can still hear this, remember, there was once an empire that thought itself eternal. And then, they woke humanity. In the Oven language, the word for human is now synonymous with the flame that never dies. In the Vrax tongue, Earth means the end. And across the outer rims, among trembling species still hiding in the void, only one phrase remains as warning. Never wake them. Never force them to fight. Because if you do, you won't get a war. You'll get extinction. Thank you for following this legendary journey. If you believe this story deserves to reach more lovers of science fiction and hearts that never surrender, leave a like, share with fellow dreamers, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the journeys yet to come. This is not humanity's ending. This is only the opening chapter of a new age. An age where we no longer fear the stars, But the stars begin to fear us.